So, okay.
Okay, so Tim was there, so he'll be joining us, and I will turn it over to you and JP to decide exactly when we should kick off, giving people a few more minutes to join.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really good to see you all. Good to see many friends that I haven't seen in a while. Thank you for joining us. We will start in 1 more minute. So 17:05 in my time. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. I want to start off by thanking our main conveners here, Ambition Loop and the Climate Champions. And my name is Bukholo Joy Kinwendo, and I have recently, well, quite a bit recently, vacated my office as a special advisor and regionalization director for the Climate Champions. And I am pleased to be hosting and co-hosting this meeting together with Jean-Paul Adam, who you all know, we've been co-hosting this meeting together. And it's been a while since we last caught up, which means that there is a lot for us to really understand what's happening in the market. Is a global cooperation working on convergence on key issues that were brought up during COP28 and, of course, the several COPs before. And as we look ahead to COP29, what are we to expect and the events that are coming in between. But I think most importantly, it's also a moment for us to get to know the real actions, as it's called, Sharing Actions Africa, the real actions that are happening in the continent. And I'm pleased that we have a full roster of experts, conveners, and doers in the continent that will take us through some of the activities that have been happening in Africa, for Africa, by Africans in the world. And at this point, I want to welcome JP for a quick update on what has been happening in the UN space. Jean-Paul?
Thank you so much, Boholo, and good morning to all from New York. Good afternoon, good evening for people joining from throughout and especially from Africa. Such a pleasure to be reconnected in this space. And just to say that I will situate a little bit our discussion in some of the processes that are happening now within the United Nations. So firstly, immediately ahead of us in September, we have the Summit for the Future, where there will also be a pact on future generations. And a lot of this work is really about encapsulating the urgency of reaching the 2030 objectives, in which also is included the climate goals that are part of the UNFCCC process, and the urgency in particular of mobilizing the finance that is needed to reach those global goals. And that links in with the Financing for Development forum, which is happening also in 2025. And of course, with COP29, where we're looking at the overall goal on finance, one of the key issues is really how we deliver that finance and at scale and with urgency based on the current challenges that we face around multilateralism in general, and also, of course, of heightened geopolitical tensions. But the fact remains is that Africa has a huge opportunity in this moment, because most of the high growth, high return opportunities are within the continent. And some of the key challenges are, of course, of how to deliver particularly private sector engagement in this quite difficult global moment, recognizing that we need de-risking, we need urgency at scale, we need to accompany the private sector for those investments, recognizing that Africa has the least investment by the private sector at present compared to all other regions, with only 14% of its climate finance coming from the private sector. And it's in that context that we really look forward to these discussions on innovations that are coming from these partners in the call that can really help us unlock some of that urgent financing at scale and address some of the obstacles and bottlenecks that are stopping us. So thanks, Boholo, for giving me the chance to just frame a little bit our discussion. And we look forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, JP. We are looking forward to that Summit of the Future and many others. And I was just in convening on by the Peace Forum, and we're discussing critical minerals. And, you know, the conversation has been everything, the recommendations that come out, even on that high-level panel by the SG, should be rooted in actionables, and should be rooted in development, and should be rooted in helping just transition. And just transition cannot exist without just value addition and just development. So I'm glad to hear that kind of framing. And so I'm pleased that to kickstart our panel and discussions this evening will be Timothy Aful-Kumson. who is our regional director for GFANZ Africa. And he will be discussing our pipeline collaboration and carbon market activation. As most of you will recall, in our lead up to COP27, we started or embarked in this pipeline development of projects worth $20 billion in partnership with UNECA. And so Tim will be getting us through updates on what is happening with GFANZ, with the champions, and all of our collaborative partners. Tim? I saw you joined earlier.
Sorry, I was mute. Thank you very much, Boholo, and thank you also, JP, for really laying the foundation for this discussion. And let me use this opportunity to also acknowledge Dr. Dahlia, who is my alternate chair for the working group on the capacity building and net zero transition finance. I see her on. So Dr. Dahlia, hi. And all colleagues that are joining. One of the things that I really appreciate, Boholo, of what you're doing, you started doing, sharing actions, is how do we collectively look at, moving forward from just the narratives, to action. And I like the action part that you put it, sharing actions, not just talking. And that is one thing that is very, very attractive. And we've been doing, a lot. And before I come on the pipeline that we're doing, and also linking it to carbon market activation, just wanted to flag that financial regulation is something that is also very, very, very important. I mean, if we don't really have robust financial regulation, it will be a big challenge actually to mobilize capital from the West, who are requesting that we use climate regulation to improve governance issues and ESG issues in Africa. So we've been teaming up with ISSB, and we had a very productive Pan-African Roundtable in Mauritius, where over 24 jurisdictions, countries came, and we already have about 7 of those jurisdictions that are very advanced. Zimbabwe is one of them, and Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania. And one encouraging aspect is that all the jurisdictions that were present were having action steps, roadmaps for considering the adoption of ISSB Standard 1 and Standard 2. And so with that, we piggyback on that, and we had a very important high-level roundtable at the AFDB annual meeting that we did together with you, the UN Climate Champion team, ISSB, AFAC of AFDB, and UNEP-FI. And the president really made that succinct appeal that this is something which is going to be very important for capital mobilization, and Africa, we need to really rally behind it. And Minister Rania, also from Egypt, reiterated the commitment of the African finance ministers and the communique that they issued when ISSB first was launched. And so it's very, very important that we don't disassociate, but we looked at this, collectively. And for GFANZ, this encompasses the 3 major flagship that we are working on. So for the pipelines, we have been working with the Climate Champions and BCG, and we've been having a lot of discussion also led by Jacinda with the C4C, Capital for Climate, on scaling up financing for these pipeline projects, really engaging actively investors. And I'm very glad to tell you that we were in a spring meeting, and I was in the meeting with Dr. Mahmoud, and he was able to really, pin one of the investors in Africa for financing in one of the projects. And they have agreed, they are going forward to sign an NDA. I don't want to disclose for confidentiality, but Dr. Mahmoud did a very good job. We actually brought them to Dr. Mahmoud's office at the IMF, and he made them very comfortable with his tea and all that. And then we talked business. And, it was very encouraging to have that productive meeting. So they have considered that they are looking at equity participation in one of these pipeline projects. We are also mobilizing other sources. We have the Global Energy Transition Initiative that we are working with Climate Works Foundation, which is also being supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies, and they are focusing on Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal. And so this is to really look at several avenues of mobilizing investors to show interest in this. And I'm very, very happy that we are recruiting, looking at having, key experts on board to really run with this. And I think some of you may have seen the positions that were advertised. Very, very competitive, but we know that we'll be recruiting, capable people to really support, to, scale this engagement up. In the area of carbon market, I think we have, I've seen that ACME, is on. So I'll leave some of the interventions for them, because we are working with them in the area of quality validation and verification processes. But we are also working with AFDB on the Africa Climate Support Facility that was launched during the annual meeting. And also looking at regional framework and continental carbon market strategy through the African free trade. And we're focusing more on if we could have a registry and regional online trading platforms instead of having proliferation of registries and trading platforms. And we're working with Egypt FRA, in moving, in this direction. And I just wanted to just flag that in October 2024, during the World Bank annual meeting, we are planning some form of buyers engagement over there. We've already spoke with the assistant treasurer of US, Honorable Alexia Talks, and she was really supportive of engaging with us on this. So we will bring all of you on board. We need to move together, because together we have the strength to really scale all the challenges. So thank you very much, Bolo, and a great job for this great initiative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim, for even ending on that note of October, because our colleague from the Climate Champions, who's also on the call, Sagarika, just flagged to me that we expect to have new projects on the pipeline by September, October. So we will grow the pile. So thanks, Sagarika, for flagging that, which leads very well to our next contributor, Sarah, who has also been a great collaborator on the creation of the platform. And I think then we can take questions that are both for you and for Sarah, looking at the platform and the pipeline, because as collaborators, you've worked well to bring in both GFANs and other financing partners. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bogolo. My name is Sarah Lemier, and this afternoon I'm here to talk about a very powerful tool that we used in this various initiative that have been mentioned just now. And this tool is capacity building and how it can be a key factor to unlock climate financing in Africa. So I'll begin just by telling you a story that illustrates the importance of the capacity building. So a few years ago, there's this entrepreneur called Dave. He approached me and he had developed this cutting-edge solution, involve advanced drone software for better crop management. He has an extensive experience, a lot of impact, but he struggled to raise and to secure funding. And the issue wasn't his idea. It was really his inability to convert this idea into a compelling business proposition for investors. So in my opinion, the capacity building plays three key roles. One is mobilizing a diverse range of stakeholders and bringing them together so that they can collaborate effectively. Those are entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers. And each one need to understand the needs of the other so that they can collaborate effectively. The second key role is skill development and equipping entrepreneurs with the necessary skills so that they can and tools so that they can raise funding in an accelerated manner. And this include understanding of financial mechanism, the different instruments at their disposal, whether it's equity, whether it's debt, blended finance instruments, grant guarantees, etc. But thirdly, most importantly, is to manage also the expectations of these entrepreneurs and accelerate the funding. And we do that by providing resources, technology, infrastructure, so that they manage to raise faster and more effectively their funding. So let's just return to that example, the Dave story. And I just compiled some examples and some pitfalls to avoid when you are fundraising. So his company called Square achieved a technology readiness of 7. They have 28 patents. But unfortunately, there are few things that he was doing. The first one is he was using an overly technical language. Dave was using a lot of jargon. It felt like he was giving a lecture at a scientific conference, not an investor meeting. So he would lose the audience in a blink of an eye. The second thing is unrealistic expectations. So Dave wanted to raise his $5 million, but he wanted it in a form of a grant or 100% in concessional loans so that he doesn't dilute his ownership. Well, again, very unrealistic. On the governance side, he was almost irritated when investors dared to ask him for a board seat. He dismissed competition and risk. So whenever he was probed about those, his reply was, there is no competition. And as for risk, I'm not worried. And last but not least, it's the vague climate impacts. So when you look at his slides, he was referencing the 17 SDGs on his slide with no specific metrics or data to back them up. Okay, so now let me clarify. So obviously Dave's company Square is a fictional example. However, every single pitfall that I've mentioned is drawn from real life experience in capacity building sessions that we have with entrepreneurs. And this highlights the immense power of this capacity building when it equips these entrepreneurs and individuals with the necessary knowledge, skills, and also realistic expectation to meet with investors and to raise funding. So to conclude, as I said, like capacity building serve like various key roles, mobilizing a diverse range of stakeholders, skills development, especially in the context of a rapid evolution of green finance market instruments, proliferation of standards, initiative, and products, and managing the expectation and accelerating the funding. So there are different initiatives that have been listed, others with some of our partners here on the call. We at SLK Capital, what we've done as a small contribution, we developed an online course that we launched and distributed on a complimentary basis a few months ago, and over 200 entrepreneurs have already enrolled. And it's really to reinforce like these key themes and help them to articulate better their business models to raise funding. Thank you. Thanks, Bogolo. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Boholo, shall I come in straight away? Is that fine? No, thanks so much, Sarah. And I think it's been very clear in terms of what you presented, and particularly about building this capacity across Africa, which is one of the fundamental aspects. And I think also building from what you have said and what Timothy said, properly supporting entrepreneurs and developers to be able to link these to key goals, the development of indicators, and using that as a means of mobilizing the right type of capital and also ensuring that there is impact. So we're delighted now to, so before we move on, I would just like to say to everyone, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, because that helps us to move things along quickly. Please put your comments, your questions in the chat, and we will have some time at the end to come back to these questions. But in the interest of time, we'll move straight ahead to our next speaker. And I'm pleased to introduce Flavia Howard, who is the co-founder and managing director of the Climate Network. So Flavia, we look forward to hear from you in terms of emerging innovations in this space.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me, Boholo and team. I'm hoping you can now hear me okay, and I'm just going to share my screen because I've got a few slides that I wanted to talk through. So Jacinda, I think you need to stop screen sharing for that one. Thank you. Great. Let me just hit slideshow. Okay, well, hi everyone, thanks so much. So as Jean-Paul said, I'm Flavia Howard. I'm the co-founder and managing director of the Climate Network. I also previously worked with the Climate Champions and with CAPE, so I'm kind of familiar with a lot of the participants here, so thank you so much. Just wanted to talk you through a couple of things today. One is the Climate Network, kind of who we are and what we're doing, as well as some of the work we've specifically done around carbon markets, and also engaging with the Kenyan government around the summit and some of the research that came out of that. So the vision for the Climate Network is to build a collaborative ecosystem of actors to solve the climate crisis faster and more effectively. And so what we are doing is building local communities of climate professionals all driving climate action in Africa. We have an overarching NGO, nonprofit, which is building these communities, but at a local level, they are driven locally by local climate actors and specifically to help accelerate solutions in each country. So at the moment, we are most active in Nairobi, but we've just launched in Tanzania, and we are speaking to local teams of local co-founders who want to build these communities in all the other countries you see there. So there's an awful lot of interest, and it shows, I think, how much how much need, how much potential is there. So to talk to you a little bit about what we've done in Nairobi, we've really built a community across these values. So ambitious, and I think I've heard this a lot today in the speech earlier. So we're not just talking about bringing people together for no reason. It has to be around action, and it has to be about driving solutions. It has to be also very collaborative. So we work across sectors, across industries, and across different types of players to try and bridge some of the divides that are there. As well as connecting people all the way from corporates to communities. And each community itself has to be local. And I think that's been one of the strengths of our community, is that it has to be people who are based in Kenya or spending a majority of their time in Kenya. This is a peer-to-peer network. So yeah, we do bring together these different types of organizations. It's a mix of companies, NGOs, donors, governments. We've actually got 4 MPs, Kenyan MPs in the network. We get huge engagement across sectors and across different types of actors as well. So people actually delivering the solutions, people advising, people financing, people talking about it, media and journalism. And we're really trying to bring everyone together to help solve the crisis. And across industries as well. And I know that specifically this call was looking about finance for nature, and say nature-based solutions are really up there. They are kind of one of the most common areas, the most common area for our members. And we're really trying to, again, bridge the divides, again, across nature. And actually nature can have a presence across all of these items and across all of these areas. So we're really trying to help forge those connections. So we've already built a really big base. Whilst our membership, it's free to join as an individual to our community, we're building out a base of organizations and sponsors that are supporting our work. But our 1,300 members is the community at the moment in Kenya. It's quite at a senior leadership level. We're not a kind of a student network or an activist network. It's very much focused on professionals and towards that senior level of professionals. We've got very good gender equity there with 52% women and say over 70% of Kenyan nationals. So what do we actually do? We are connecting people through events. So we run our own events on a monthly basis to bring people together and hold a platform to help people to share their knowledge, share their information. We kind of let people share their jobs, their events, their resources. We want to be the platform that everyone can find each other and everyone can connect each other. We're hoping later this year to actually launch a platform as well that takes us off WhatsApp onto something that's much more interactive. The final thing, and what I think is the most important and interesting, is about how we enable our members to contribute towards the climate ecosystem. So how do we help our members to elevate their perspectives and to make Kenya a more enabling environment for climate solutions to thrive? So what I wanted to do is just quickly dive into 2 specific outputs that we did around that I think would be quite interesting to this group in particular. So firstly, we played a really big role in helping to provide inputs on Kenya's carbon market regulations, which have just been released. We brought together within our community 124 carbon practitioners across 2 groups providing inputs. We did 6 rounds of feedbacks, and that's really, really detailed, going line by line through the legislation with real experts and real practitioners on the ground, providing feedback to the government saying, this is what we're hearing from industry, this is what's workable and what isn't. And that's really in the absence of a carbon markets association. So we were then kind of in the workshops and really trying to provide that link between different types of actors. I think it's had a really big impact, and the final regulations were released just 2 weeks ago. There's been a real kind of improvement in terms of definitions, in terms of how the projects are being taxed, how the process is working, and lots more. We're actually in the process now of bringing all of this feedback together and saying, what we do need now is an independent association. We have played the role of a carbon markets association, but now we need our own one. So that's what we're doing. We are incubating this within the community at the moment, and we'll be spinning out the Carbon Markets Association of Kenya actually in just a couple of weeks' time to be its own association. So we played this sort of catalytic role of bringing people together and then spinning it out. So watch this space. We would love to do that in other countries too. As we build other communities in other locations, there's a real role for saying, okay, where is there a gap in terms of convening actors, and how do we play a role in that? The second item I wanted to share, and although this is a bit out of date, I think it's still really, really useful, is ahead of the Africa Climate Summit last September. The Office of the President asked us to survey our members and get an understanding of what projects were happening across the continent, and what should be up there, what should be up on stage. And actually, we got some suggestions as well from the climate champions who inputted to this. We have a big skew towards Kenya, unfortunately, so it's not a perfect set of data, but I think it's still quite interesting to share some of what came out of that. So what we did was ask all these people working in climate change, what are the challenges, the opportunities, what are you excited about? What we saw was that renewable energy and clean cooking is really up there. And in part, that's because a lot of the people are working in renewable energy and clean cooking. But I still think it's really interesting that renewable energy carbon markets were, what people are most excited about, most interested in investing in. And some of the smaller technology is still there, but I think a real skew and not much for nature, given that nature is such a big part of what people are working in. Funding and finance, which again I know is a big focus for the conversation today, is by far and away the biggest challenge. It's a big concern, and but even more so outside Kenya. So actually 51% in Kenya saw it as a challenge, but more than 68% outside. So I think also reflecting that Kenya is a bit of a hub, and that there is a lot more that needs to be done outside the continent, outside Kenya, as we grow our networks and as we kind of think about finance. How do we do it kind of outside those hubs as well? We also asked people what do they want to see from policymakers. This is very much in the run up to the summit last year, but people wanting to see tax and fiscal incentives, wanting clear and transparent policies, and thinking about what the role we were trying to play was, how do we get those messages, what people need, what people want, and help raise that up to government. And so that's what we did in the Africa Climate Summit last year. It's what we would really like to do again. I think there is a huge need for this, raising these perspectives of people who are actually doing the work, facing the challenges. And what we want to do is use research like this to elevate those perspectives. We published this in a report. It was released last year, so it's available on our website. Please take a look. We really want to do it again. We would love to make this an annual report with a much broader data set as we grow our network, but actually with much more academic rigor in terms of how we share people's views, share people's challenges, and really get some of these messages out there. And I think as we grow our network, we could be sharing messages, not just of a few hundred, mostly in Kenya, but actually of thousands of people across the continent, with a united voice going into some of these bigger climate negotiations, and with a really clear connection from industry through to government as well. So yeah, we're looking for partners as well. Please do get in touch with me if you'd like to collaborate. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Flavia. We really appreciate it. And may I suggest that you perhaps share your slides in the chat, because I think it would be very interesting for everyone. And I think we all really recognize in particular the success, the success of climate resilient investments have to be community driven, and linking this as well with the opportunity, for example, around carbon markets, which potentially this can be a superpower for Africa, but then being able to develop that regulatory aspect. And I think the needs were very interesting in terms of what you expressed, and how we support African countries to deliver those elements, while also empowering that generation of ideas and areas from the community perspective. So we'll now move to Kelvin Massingham, who will share with us something a little bit focus perhaps around a different country perspective. We're looking at the new Nigeria country platform. So Kelvin is the Director of Risk and Resilience at FSD Africa. And Kelvin, we look very much forward to hearing from this perspective using the Nigeria example.
Hi, Jean-Paul. It's Jonathan here. Unfortunately, Kelvin is, from what I understand, bedridden.
So sorry to hear that.
I am at fairly late notice jumping into his place, so I apologize for the slightly waffled kind of tone of thoughts that I'm going to provide. But Kelvin sends his regards, and he's sorry that he can't make it here today. So the work that we're doing in Nigeria that we're really keen to talk about is the Lagos Climate and Adaptation and Resilience Plan, which is a piece of work that we're developing under FSD Africa's Risk and Resilience pillar. FSD Africa being an organization I know many of you are quite aware of, but Nairobi-based, UK FCDO funded, with a mandate to make finance work for Africa's sustainable future. And so LCARP, the Lagos Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan, came as a response to the increasing need that we were seeing and hearing from our networks in Nigeria, and especially in Lagos, that the cost of inaction around different climate impact drivers was only growing, and so there wasn't yet a coherent government-centered plan from what is quite a sizable subnational to address a whole range of the challenges that were starting to pop up in a whole range of different ways. And so LCARP started in 2022 as a way of trying to develop an understanding of what cost of inaction around these issues were, and then to build a comprehensive suite of policy and regulation and approaches and methodologies that could be used to flood in investment that would overcome what this measured cost of inaction was going to be. So this, in terms of work that FSD Africa does, and particularly within our risk and resilience pillar, is very much within our wheelhouse. Our risk and resilience pillar intends to look at two different things. Firstly, building up risk markets, and a lot of you would have seen, for example, some of the work that we're doing with AFDB under ACRIFA and our sustainable insurance work, which is trying to build risk markets to better meet the climate risk related needs of the continent, but also around building resilience, especially economic, social, and environmental resilience, where a lot of our nature work, for example, sits. And I know a lot of you will know my colleagues, Dorothy and Hosborn, who work on that piece as well, especially through the African Natural Capital Alliance. So LCARP is well within our wheelhouse as FSD Africa. And it's a really interesting way of engaging with, as I said, a very sizable subnational to try and address some of these challenges. So what are we doing at LCARP, and what have we done recently? So LCARP has, in the last year, gone through 4 main work streams. And the intention of LCARP under these 4 work streams is to make Lagos a model climate resilient city by 2035, with the ambition of flooding in $10 billion of investment into climate resilient infrastructure and projects in order to overcome the measured cost of inaction. So the first work stream that we worked on was looking at what that measured cost of inaction actually is and trying to break it down. The second work stream that we had was around building, as I said, the approaches, the methodologies, the understanding of what the policy and regulatory environment needs to be in order for Lagos to attract investment. The third was, from the ground up, building an understanding of a pipeline of projects that Lagos can use and to kind of go and pitch to investors. And then we can test investor interest and try and fund a number of these projects. And then the fourth was working right across the Lagos state government, led by the Honourable Commissioner Tukumba Wahab and also Governor Sanwo-Olu, to try and build the political will and the political agency right across the state government, and then basically build the delivery model that would deliver LCARP. So those were the 4 work streams. Just flicking through them roughly, just to give you some insights from what we found from this. So the first work stream basically told us that the cost of inaction for Lagos to not act against climate change, and actually we only looked at 3 very specific indicators, so extreme heat, extreme rainfall, and sea level rises. So there's a whole range of other things and also interaction between these indicators that would make this cost of inaction possibly bigger, but 35 billion. So 35 billion per annum, 12 times the size of Lagos State government's budget, is the cost of not doing anything. And this is sizable and hits in a whole range of different ways. It comes from the 1.4 million Lagosians that would be disrupted every year. It comes from the 500,000 students who wouldn't have access to an effective education. It comes from the 20,000 heat-related deaths each year that come from these increases in extreme heat. And there's a whole range of other things, pollution, soil erosion that we didn't even consider. So there is that cost of inaction is a really powerful motivator, and it comes from a climate analytical model that can be taken out, shown to investors, and used as a real piece of not just thought leadership, but as a real kind of demonstration of the technical know-how the state government has over its different LGAs and where the impact is going to be seen. So that's the first work stream that we did. The second work stream that we looked at was building the playbook around the methodologies and approaches. And so that playbook had a few different things. Firstly, it assessed why bankability for different projects is an important thing. And this is getting exactly at Jean-Paul's point about needing to flood in private finance. There needs to be projects that are not just attractive to concessional donors and the multilateral banks that really are willing to take that focus on social and environmental returns, but it needs to be applicable and investable for the commercial private capital out there. So that's one really important kind of stage setting exercise that we did. The second thing that we've done is to think about what the different approaches to different financiers could be, and with a particular focus on untapped pools of domestic local capital, so insurance, pension fund capital that isn't really yet going into sectors and projects that actually have a really big return on the safety and security of their local populations. And the other thing that we looked at is the different sort of range of instruments and mixture of that which are required in order to fund potential projects. So we would love to see, for example, Lagos have a rebalancing to about 30 to 40% debt and equity investment, 30 to 40% public-private partnerships in the form of, let's say, blended finance, and then the remainder really concessional grant support that targets and risk mitigation instruments, many of which have been touched on and talked about. So we've built out a playbook that's going to be used by Lagos, locally applicable, locally relatable, and should be accessible to the folks within Lagos state government that are doing this. So that was the second work stream. And the third work stream we did was building a funnel of projects. And so one potential finding out of this out of LCARP for us has been, actually, you need to go all the way across local governments to find where the interesting projects are, and there needs to be communication and collaboration that's brought together under a strategic umbrella. And for us, that strategic umbrella is LCARP. So we have 33 projects that have been primarily assessed that are reasonably high level. Of those, we funneled down to 14 projects that have gone through an appraisal study, and then further down into now 2 high priority projects that we're looking to take to feasibility study funding, and which have already received pre-feasibility study kind of focus. And those 2 projects are, firstly, the development of a waste-to-energy facility in Lagos, which would support, I believe, it's the waste of 2 to 3 million folks in Lagos. And that's not enormous in and of itself, but that would also be built on pre-existing landfill sites, rehabilitate those landfill sites, get some of the worst kind of some of the worst areas in terms of that urban blockage, and try and clear out some of the waste that's sitting in these sites. And the second project is the joint laying of water and wastewater pipelines to help overcome some of the worst areas of some sewage overflows, particularly in coastal areas, which are contributing to erosion and which are contributing to leakage out into the Lagos Lagoon. So those 2 projects that we're currently seeking, what's looking to be over $1 billion USD, so it'll be about 1.2, 1.3 billion. So it's a really big amount of capital that's kind of required in there. But those 2 projects that came right at the top of our prioritization have been tested with investors. We understand investors are interested in them from a number of different positions, whether it's more kind of first loss equity type positions under the right format of public-private partnerships, whether it's more commercial with concessional support. And we're currently going through feasibility studies at the moment to really kind of test out those operational models. So those 2 projects we're really excited by, and we're hoping that in the next phase of LCARP we can get to that. And then the fourth, I know a lot's been said about capability building.
If I could just, I think you're about to wrap up anyway, and you've done a great job.
Pretty close.
But if you can wrap up the fourth, that'd be perfect. Thanks.
Certainly. Yeah, the fourth is around that capability building and the governance piece. So call to action here. I think we're really interested in potentially working with members of the call around 3 things. The first is we want to have a conversation around how to flood in adaptation financing with any of you that are interested, and especially doing it at scale. The second is, if you are doing work in Nigeria, and in particular in Lagos, and want to be involved in LCARP, please reach out to us. And then the third is also the LCARP approach can be applied elsewhere. So let's call it an XCARP. So if there are any other cities that you're working in and are really interested in seeing those 4 sort of work streams rolled out in your locations, we'd love to have a chat. But thank you for the time, Jean-Paul, and apologies for the
thank you, Jonathan. You did a fantastic job at the last minute. I think in particular, this idea of bringing in domestic finance, so it brings these virtuous chains of, because if you unlock the local domestic financing, it leads to so much other multiplier effects. And I think if we can build on the example of what we've heard from Kenya, from Nigeria, and then apply that in other countries, some that are maybe starting from with more challenges, it will still be very interesting, and we want to learn a lot from these experiences. So I believe, so thanks so much for that, Jonathan. And I'd like to now invite Juan Pablo Bonilla from IDB, who will share with us some experiences from the Latin American region, and in particular on how they have used de-risking tools to unlock innovative finance, including debt swaps and others. So Juan Pablo, I think I saw you connected before. If you could come in, and apologies that because we've overrun a little bit, if you could be quite succinct, that would be fantastic.
Hi, Jean-Paul. Are you listening well?
Yes, we hear you perfectly, and we can see you.
I am another JP. I'm Juan Pablo
Exactly.
Bonilla. It's a pleasure meeting you all. I'm the manager of sustainable development and climate change at the ADB. And by the way, thank you for the invitation. I'm learning a lot from different experiences in Africa. So this has been also very important for me. I'm gonna talk to the team about different experiences. I wanted to take a moment about the importance of what you said. We are from the ADB group. We have the public side of the ADB. We also have the private side, which is BidInvest, and our innovation lab, which is BidLab. And we are starting to every day work more as a group. Our institutional strategy was just approved, Jean-Paul, in our annual meeting. And one key issue of the institutional strategy is to link climate, nature, and disaster risk management to think about how to scale up investment. But at the same time, BidInvest, the capital increase of BidInvest was approved. And this is the first MDB going through the MDB reform. The new model of BidInvest is called Originate to Share. And the idea for BidInvest is to de-risk and unlock private sector investments. So I'm very happy to share with you that is the first MDB going through that process. And as a group, we're every day more working public and private sector to unlock investment. So a good example that I wanted to start sharing was Chile. We had a policy-based loan addressing different policy changes with the government of Chile. And one of the changes was how to close, for example, coal power plants as part of the decarbonization and the NDC plan of Chile. We addressed that from the public side. But then BidInvest came and they had a loan with one of the private sector companies was supposed to close the coal power plants. It was a loan for solar, but they monetized advancing the closing of coal power plants in Chile and using grant resources from the CIF, from the Climate Investment Funds. They incorporated that monetization as part of the deal that they have for solar, allowing them that monetization not solo to get the discount when they close the coal power plant, but also to continue accessing carbon markets. So it was, I think, the first case of the Climate Investment Fund from private sector to advance coal closing plants in Latin America and the Caribbean. But that link of public-private was very important. We're going to use that model also now for Dominican Republic, also to see closing of coal power plants, but how from the public side we can do policy making and then BidInvest complement with private sector investments. You mentioned the for nature. I think for us at the bank, and I wanted to, we're innovating in 3 areas. The first one is the improving that link of the Ministries of Finance with environment. We have created, Jean-Paul, the platform of Ministers of Finance for Latin America and the Caribbean for climate and sustainability. Is totally owned by the countries. And we're creating different working groups in the Ministries of Finance about taxonomy, about sustainable instruments, as that is helping a lot to make that connection of Ministers of Finance with environment and the sectors. So based on that, we are advancing with not only sustainability-linked bonds. I think the example of Uruguay was key. The Minister of Finance of Uruguay had a very good presentation at the COP about that one, because it was the first having a step up and down link to the NDC of Uruguay, but also to biodiversity outcomes. So the KPIs were not only related to the NDC, but also to biodiversity. That's why that importance of the 2 agendas is key. And we supported the government to do all the framework and monitoring for that sustainability linked bond. That is one example that we're following in other countries right now. The second one is the for nature swaps. We started with Barbados. The ADB has developed a very good product. It's called a policy-based guarantee. It's a guarantee that we provide to the country based on a matrix of policy changes. And that guarantee helps to issue new bonds to do debt conversion. And the resources that are freed through that debt conversion can be allocated to nature or climate. So in Barbados, it was a 100 million guarantee with additional 50 million from the Nature Conservancy. And the debt conversion for Barbados resulted in about $50 million that will be allocated for the new natural protected areas, marine natural protected areas fund of Barbados. The second one was Ecuador. We provided a guarantee of $85 million that accompany another guarantee from the DFC, and all the free money for that debt conversion will go to Galapagos. And we're starting to see now about a second phase for Amazon. Barbados, we're starting also the second phase of the debt for nature. And we have at least 5 or 6 countries on the region that are asking that. Now, you have talked about capacity. Many people talk about finance innovation, but we need to invest a lot first. So the technical capacity, the resources that the IDB has provided for the Ministries of Finance, Environment, and Sectors to measure and to create this capacity is not minor. For Barbados, we started with a technical cooperation of about $600,000. And for Uruguay, we spend more than $1 million for the MRB and spending on the KPI, not only the definition, but also how to measure. So this is not minor. In Ecuador, we did the same. It's how to use technical resources to create the capacity at the country level to do climate finance innovation. And it's not only to the development, it's to the follow-up. Something that we're learning every time you do sustainability-linked bonds, the KPIs usually, I mean, finance is your counterpart, but the compliance of the KPIs are going to be in the sectors, in environment, in energy, in agriculture, cattle production. You need a technical cooperation for the sectors to follow up, to go through the compliance mechanisms. So investing in advance to prepare the countries, making the link of finance with environment and sectors, and then having technical cooperation to follow through the process is fundamental. The third one that I wanted to share.
Juan Pablo, if you can wrap up in about a minute and a half, that would be great. Thanks.
Sure. The last one is clauses for resiliency. We're the first MDB, Jean Paul, that have created the natural disaster risk management clauses. We are including that already in our contracts to postpone the principal payment for 2 years. We have already 5 countries using that. And finally, to close, we have developed Big Clima, IDB Clima. We're the first MDB that with our own capital is paying for results in our lending operations. So we're going to have 10 pilots, 2024, 2025, in which we define KPIs in our lending operations, just investment operations, related to climate or biodiversity. And at the year 5, we pay back about 5% of the total of the loan to the Ministry of Finance. Again, to engage more the Ministries of Finance with sectors in paying for results in our embedded operations. And in other session, I can share with you about Amazon Forever. It's one of our key programs right now, is to scale up investments in the Amazon with development banks, with private sector banks, but that could be for a second conversation. Thank you.
Perfect, Juan Pablo. We really appreciate that. And I think there's a lot of what you are doing that can be applied in an African context. Boholo, back to you. I know we're very tight on time.
Yeah, thanks, JP. I mean, the other JP, I think there's certainly a lot more you can share with us. So it would be great to have you back on a finance specific session, and we start to drill down on really how do we unlock finance, which is a conversation. Yes, it's been ongoing, but we've been seeing it in this last month really being strengthened. And I think it's as we're getting ready for all the various climate weeks or climate engagements around finance. And for those that will be in Bonn, I want to take this opportunity to plug our event. So I'm a co-chair of the Debt Relief for a Green and Inclusive Recovery, and we will have tomorrow, Wednesday, a session, a panel discussion on how do we deal with debt. And if it's an issue of just liquidity or if it's a much bigger systemic issue that we should be dealing with, and we will subsequently have a dinner on that day. So if you're in Bonn, please do reach out to us and we'll share that. And I think this kind of wraps up our conversations today, because it's really around building resilience and adaptive capacity in communities, and ensuring that rather than the divergence and polarity that we're seeing around the world, that we are working towards synergies and convergence, particularly on driving actions in the continent. And I'm glad that we had these various stakeholders with such diverse backgrounds really telling us what they are doing in that space and the progress that they are seeing. And again, we encourage you to reach out for more information to the ones that have presented. I wish that we had more time. We were a bit ambitious with the agenda this time around because we haven't had the sharings call for a while. But certainly the next time we will try to make it shorter so that people have more time for them to really engage on that subject matter. But as usual, we have the chat that you can use to really follow up with the individual presenters. And I want to thank my co-host, JP, for running with the panel quite effectively, and ask him if he has his last words.
Sorry, the unmuting just took me a minute longer than I expected. Now, I think we've heard some very interesting perspectives in terms of building the pipeline, in terms of the key actions that can help bring the private sector to the table in an African context. But I would especially say the key next steps are about delivering African ownership of this process. And that comes out very clearly in the Nairobi roadmap, in the aftermath of the Nairobi Climate Summit, which is very much about unlocking Africa's superpower, which is climate resilient growth, nature positive growth, climate positive growth. Africa, due to the current circumstance, has not contributed as much to carbon emissions globally, and therefore the opportunity for climate positive growth is more situated within Africa. And this opportunity is one which has to take place with strong local engagement, community-led engagement, and the strengthening of the African private sector. And I think those are some of the key things that have emerged. And we are very interested to continue to learn from the experiences of other regions that we've heard, and also in terms of the policy mix that African governments need to put in place while continuing to empower those that will deliver on the ground. So thanks a lot, Baholo, and we've really appreciated what we've heard.
Yeah, thanks, JP. And I want to take 2 minutes to check if we have any questions, so that we have our full hour since we started at 17:05. So if there are any questions, reflections from the crowd before we close this meeting, please do put your hand up, and then we'll take that. And if not, I will put one person on the spot for his quick reactions to today's meeting. Nigel?
I always rely on you. Always rely on you to keep me on my toes. No, just to thank everyone who's shared. Right, I mean, I feel like there's so much energy and innovation and detailed understanding. This is a conversation of people, of experts sharing. And what excites me most is this sense that several of you have talked about, there's a growing awareness of how to mobilize domestic resources. So not to get stuck in the conversation sort of complaining about where the international finance is, but work with the resources that are available. And I know I get the sense more and more that those resources are significant. And by mobilizing those, it will make the conditions more attractive for international finance. So really excited. Also lovely to have Juan Pablo to start seeing some cross-fertilization with LATAM. Juan Pablo, we're just about to start a sharing actions call in LATAM. So maybe that's something we should be doing with IADB and to help us build that partnership. So thanks, Baholo and JP. Fantastic gathering of inputs as always.
Thanks, Nigel. Jamie just threw a spanner into my closing and has asked a question of who independently verifies the data for the sovereign sustainability linked bonds. And I want to throw that to JP because as former finance minister, you should always be ready to answer these questions.
I'm always ready, and it's the crux of the question. So there is no universal authority on this. But there are principles, notably the ICMA principles, and but the best approach, I think, is firstly to ground the data within national processes. So for countries themselves need to be able to adequately report and link it to their goals and their ambitions in terms of their national plans, whether it be nationally determined contributions, national adaptation plans, and link that as well to impact on the ground. For me, I think that's the most important element. In terms of the global finance architecture, there is, I think, a growing consensus on what this would be, but there is no universally set criteria. And hence the importance of working with countries on this. I think we heard some examples from the Latin America region of countries that have done that and which have been useful. But by no means should we take individual examples as being sector defining or being the absolute example of what we need to achieve. We have to situate it within the particular circumstances of Africa, and ultimately the test of what I would say is a good result is the impact that it has on communities and the people who it should be helping. That should be the determining factor from my perspective, and indicators that show that are the best ones.
Thank you, JP. Thanks to you and to Nigel for always humoring my putting you on the spot.
Baholo, I've just for Jamie and anyone else who's interested, I've just posted a link to the Sustainability Linked Sovereign Debt Hub, which is a very good collaborative which IDB and others are part of, which is kind of a place that collects all of the information and is driving a lot of the best practice.
Very good. Thank you. And thanks everyone for sticking it out with us. We will send out this summary and the notes that accompany it. And as always, we will also share the YouTube link. I know a lot more people watch it at their leisure and who are not able to join the call. But we thank you for your continued engagement, and we will invite you to the next session. Look out for emails from Ambition Loop and Climate Champions and all of our partners. And thank you. Have a good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Bye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.